Hi, I'm Bobbie from Geeky Bobbin, and today we're going to talk about planning out your fussy cutting. So right now I'm hosting the Arctic Vortex quilt along, and the Arctic Vortex pattern has diamond-shaped blocks, and in the middle there's a nice big spot for you to feature some really fun fabrics, and that's called fussy cutting, when you're cutting around a specific motif in the print. So let's talk about a few things that you want to keep in mind when you're fussy cutting. Before we get started, let's look at a couple of tools that might be helpful. First thing we're going to need is the paper template that comes with the pattern. You can see here I've cut out the middle so that we can see through to the motif that we're looking at. I've also got a ruler that I happen to have that has somewhat the right shape. The benefit of a ruler is that you can see all the way through it. Might also find washi tape helpful and, of course, some pins. The first thing we want to look at is the scale of the print. So I've got this holly fabric here, and I can take my paper template and try to isolate one of those little bits of holly. Now, I didn't cut out all the way to the stitch line when I cut out my paper template because I need to use this for cutting my fabric, and it would be just a little bit too flimsy if I cut all the way to the edge. So I can get a decent view of what I'm centering using the template, but I don't know what's going on around the edges there. So this is where an acrylic template or a ruler can be a little bit more helpful. And what I did is I lined up my paper template under this ruler, and I found that the height of this ruler is perfect for what I'm doing. And the edge of this hexagon right here, the second one, happens to be the edge of this diamond. So I added a little bit of washi tape here, that green and white stripe, so that I could see where the other edge of the diamond would be. So this is actually going to be really helpful when I'm trying to isolate my motifs. So when I use this template on the holly, I can see what is inside the stitch line. And I've got a little bit of a berry peeking through there. I've got some extra leaves up at the top, and I didn't see that when I was using my paper template. So I think that this print has too small of a scale for me to fussy cut. I can still use this for my diamonds, but it would just strip cut because it wouldn't really make that big of a difference. Next, I have these fairies. So these are larger than the individual bits of holly, and I can again use my paper template to see, and it looks like the size of one fairy is pretty good compared to the size of the diamond. Because I'm fussy cutting, I can twist things around so that I can get that fairy to fit. But let's take a look again with our see-through template. This is actually a perfect scale for what I'm looking for. Let's take a look at one more example of scale. So here we have much smaller figures on this print. These little ornament people, they're much smaller in terms of scale, but they do fit perfectly in the diamond template. And if I use my acrylic one, I can even see that I can completely isolate one of these little peeps and not get like this guy's toes coming in, or this one's jump rope, whatever that thing is. That's awesome. So even though the figures are smaller than they are here, we've got enough negative space around that motif that it will work out. How about one more example here? So I really like these blenders, and I can isolate that red one pretty nicely. And when I use my clear template, I can see that I've got little bits of some of the other blenders poking in from the sides. So in this case, I need to make a decision whether that is too distracting for me or if that's okay. And I think I'm okay with it because this red is so strong and the blue just kind of recedes into the background. So I feel like this blender works great. If I was trying to isolate the gray one, that's a little bit harder to do because then these colors come forward a little bit compared to the gray. So here's another trick that I like to use when I'm just not sure if that piece is going to work out. I take a couple of strips of either scrap fabric or the fabric that I'm actually going to be using to go around this block. And I lay the strips just over the stitch line. So that's the dashed line there. I lay the strips right on top of that stitch line so it helps me visualize it. And then on this side of the block, I will have some lighter greens. So now I can see what it looks like isolated. And the lines on the template are a little bit distracting. So I'm just going to remove that. So that gives me a better masking of where that motif actually starts and stops. The next thing that we want to look at, once we've decided that we have the right scale, is we want to make sure that we have enough space. So the first thing is scale, the second thing is space. Do we have enough space around these fairies so that we can cut as many as we need? And this is where the pins or the tape come in. If I isolate this fairy like that, there's the outline of that fairy, and I'm just going to use these pins to mark the corners of my cut line. So one at each corner, moving the pin heads right to the corner. So let's see how much of this next fairy I can manage to get. I can get the wings, the hat, and the shoes. All right, so I can use pins again to mark the corners. So I know I can get 2 fairies out of this. I'm going to take another pin and put it along the cutting line that is marked by the washi tape. So you can either use pins or tape. I don't like to mark directly on the fabric because if you need to move the lines, tape and pins are a lot easier to move. I would hate to actually cut these out only to find that, you know, I had planned on cutting there and then I'm missing a corner here. This way I know that this fairy's cutting lines don't cut into this fairy's cutting lines. All right, so next time you need to fussy cut, I hope you'll remember to check the scale, check if there's other stuff creeping in from the sides, and if there's enough space between motifs so that you don't cut into the next one. Happy stitching! I hope you found that helpful. And so I hope you found that helpful. I can't wait to see, don't move your hands because that changes the focus. I hope you found that helpful. I can't wait to see the fussy cutting that you're going to do. That's it.